Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Knowledge webinar episode. This week, creating building takeoffs in Vectorworks. In this webinar, Jonathan Pickup is going to cover the concept of creating a building takeoff report in Vectorworks Architect 2016. In order to do this, he's going to cover the basics of creating worksheets. And it also look at designing a building takeoff, because while Vectorworks has the ability to report all the information you require, it doesn't know yet what information that might be. So you'll also be looking at different techniques for reporting information Vectorworks. And let me tell you a little bit more about Jonathan. Jonathan Pickup worked in public and private architecture practices before gaining New Zealand's registration as an architect. He also spent 8 years in England, where he learned how to work on and manage large computer-based projects ranging from large shopping centers to high-profile commercial projects. After gaining his UK registration as an architect and learning to use MicroStation first and Vectorworks, Jonathan returned to New Zealand in 1997 and set up his current company to provide CAD training and support services to design professionals. He produces training and computer system manuals, including 4 Vectorworks tutorial guides, provides on-site and classroom training, and gives technical support. In 2007, he started a subscription site that provides online training, regular online sessions, and thousands of tutorial videos to hundreds of subscribers. So here you have it. And he'll tell you more about his site later on. But before we get going, here's an overview of what we do at Knowledge. Knowledge is one of the largest online stores for design software, and we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's needs. So come visit us at knowledge.com, and for more daily software news and limited time promotions, also visit the Knowledge blog and follow us on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. Coming up next week, introducing V-Ray 3.3 for Maya. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and is being recorded, so if you want to rewatch this or any webinar episode in our collection, just head on over to Knowledge's YouTube or Vimeo channel. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the screen and the word to our presenter. Jonathan, take it away.
Thank you, Barbara. So today we're going to talk about creating a building takeoff in Vectorworks, and on my screen you can see that I've got some framing member objects and I've got some walls and footings, and we're going to talk about how we get information from that. But just before we get started, I wanted to show you what was available. You should notice on your GoToMeeting control panel there's something called a handout, and what I've created is this little handout, and this is just a cut down version of one of my monthly manuals. So last month in February, we looked at this as a manual topic or a workshop topic. And so the original manual was about 76 pages. I've cut lots of those pages out for you, so there's only a few pages there. But we're going to talk about an introduction to worksheets to start with. We're going to look at how we can actually collect information. We're then going to look at how we design our report, because how you design your report is fundamental to actually creating the Vectorworks model as well as getting the information out. So you've got to think about what you want in order to get the information. So what options we got when we come to walls, for example, and then we're going to look at foundations, how different ways that we can get information from the foundations, and there's about 20 pages here. We'll look at floor framing, flooring, and you can see that I've given you some hand-drawn sketches. This is just part of my style, so I tend to try to describe concepts visually. And then we're going to count some walls, and if we get time we'll do some other things. So that's just a short manual just to give you a flavor of what today's all about, something you can take away. As I said, it's a handout, but without any more trouble, let's get into it. So here's my Vectorworks model. I've actually got walls, I've got roof, doors and windows, and so on. So when we start to think about doing a building takeoff, we have to think about what information we really want. So for example, do we need to know the volume of our footings, or do we need to know the length of our footings? That's all part of your design, and that's going to affect what you ask Vectorworks to provide. Now there's more than one way to get information. If we look at, for example, a wall, you'll see that there's a certain amount of information here on the object info palette. So it's got the height, the offset, the name of the wall, and so on. If we look at a framing member, it's quite different. You notice it's got span, lengths, heights, and we've got all these things like the ending mitre, beginning mitre, and so on. So when we want to report information, different objects are going to give us the ability to report information in different ways. Some objects are going to work really well if you just go Tools, Reports, and you choose Create a Report, and you tell it what kind of object you want to report. So for example, if it's a window, we can do it like that. If it's a framing member, which is what we're going to do, we just got to find the framing member. There it is. And you can see there's a lot of information about a framing member. But you might notice that a wall is missing here. So there's no ability to use this technique to find information about our walls, but we have another way. First of all, let's start a worksheet. So I'm going to start a building takeoff. I'm going to create a new resource. It's going to be called a worksheet. And I don't know exactly how long it should be. I don't know how many rows I need. I don't know how many columns I need. But I'm just going to give it a title, Building Takeoff. This is number 3. I've had a couple of goes at this. I might have to add extra columns later. I don't know, so I'm going to have to edit this sometime. First of all, I'm going to start to label my report. Building Takeoff. Where are we going to start? We're going to start with our foundations. And we're going to start with our foundation walls. All right, we could format these to make them easier to read, so let's format that cell. We're going to change the font or change the size. That's going to be 16. Make it bold. Let's make it slightly grey, 60% grey. And let's format the cell. This is going to be 14-point high, also bold, and also 60% grey. And you can see at the top of the screen there it just says grey 60%. And finally, my foundation walls. Let's format that. That's going to be 12-point, and it's going to be bold. And that's just going to help me define these parts when I've got a long report. Now, you might want to know what my report's going to finally look like. So let me show you one that I've already created. So there you can see my report that's already created. So you can see I've got my title at the top, then my foundations. And so this was able to find all of my framing, all of my floors, my walls, doors and windows, ceiling, roof, and so on. But I come back to this design of the report. Do you need to know how much paint you want to use, how many sheets of plasterboard you want to use, and so on? If that's part of your report, you're going to have to do a little bit more work to get that information out. But it's all available. So I'll just push that off to the side so that I can come back to it if I need to. So the first thing I need is, for my foundation walls, I might have more than one wall type. So let's type in wall type. If I had I better spell that correctly, I suppose. So let's tab across there. We need to know the length. And we'll also need to know the surface area of the wall for painting or for plaster. So area. So if I select that cell, and that cell, right click, let's format those, and we'll just make them bold so they stand out as a title. So the next thing we need to do is to find the walls. Now there's more than one way to do this. One of the ways of doing it is to insert a function. So we could ask for example, we could come down here and find a wall style name, and then we could put in a criteria. So the wall style name, we need to insert a criteria. So the criteria might be the layer is foundation, the type is a wall, and the class is a foundation wall. So I think I've got one here, wall foundation. So it finds 21 walls. But what if those walls are different wall style names? That's not going to help us. The other problem with this is that if you use this technique of putting in the function and the criteria, you'll have to repeat the same criteria here with the length and the same criteria with area. So let's remove all of that, and we're going to try a different way. Right-click, database. So using a database will automatically look for objects that meet a criteria. So if we add an extra wall type to this project, all we need to do is recalculate, and Vectorworks will automatically find those new walls. So the layer is foundation. Now you might notice I keep turning off these design layer viewports because I don't want to find objects that might be in a design layer viewport, might be linked to my site plan or something like that. So the type is wall. Now if I'm going too fast, Barbara, just slow me down. If people have got a question at some point, just interrupt me and I'll answer the question then.
Sure, Jonathan. Well, so far so good.
So on my foundation, I'm going to look for anything that is a wall. So it will include these walls and those ones, because they might be on a footing class, that might be on a wall class. So what you might notice is that I've already drawn some information, and that as I'm building my report, I can use the information that I've drawn. But because of the design of my report, certain information is on certain classes, or it's a certain type of information. And so there's a two-way strategy here. You've got to design your report to know what you want to report about your building. So you've got to sit down and sketch out, and you might notice that in this handout I've actually drawn it just as a list of things that I want. So for example, for walls I want the cladding, I want the lining, I want the structure. You know, you've got to sit down and figure out exactly what do you want from this report. Then, based on what you want to get out of the report, you might have to redraw or recreate some of your objects. So if you need to know the plaster on the outside of the wall, you'll need to actually calculate it. If you need to know the size of the cladding or the area of the cladding on the outside of the wall, and that's a different area than the inside of the wall, you'll have to draw your walls with components in order to do that. I think I've got a sketch of that here. So if you're looking at walls, you know, do you need to know the baseboard or the skirting? If so, then you'll need to make sure that you build that. So there's a two-way working here between what you want to report and how you're going to build the objects in Vectorworks. Now I've already done all of that, so my objects are actually going to do what I want. So we've got our layer, our type is a wall, click OK. Now if you have a look, it's found 42 different objects, 42 different walls. Now what I'd like to know is what the wall type name is. So let's insert a function. So insert menu, function. Now there are a lot of functions here. I am not going to go through all of these. One of the tricks I've got for you though is if you click on an area, so later on we're going to look at areas. If we click on the area, have a read of this description. This returns the 2D objects, or the total area of 2D objects that meet that area. Now what we're looking for is the name. We're looking for a wall type name, so let's start with name. See if there's anything here to do with names. No, nothing there to do with names. Keep coming down. Roof, no. Walls, wall style name. So there's something that will return the name of a wall style. So let's choose that. Put an equals in the front, so it's a formula, and click on the green tick. Now you'll notice that it found 42 objects. That's what that 42 there means. It found 42 objects, and it found a whole bunch of them. Some are 6-inch walls, some are 8-inch walls, and some are 12-inch walls. This is just a metric measurement, but it's the same as a 12-inch wall. Now it's given us a report which is a long list. Let's carry on because later on we can shorten it if we want. So now we need to know a length. So let's put an equals. We know we need an equals. Let's insert a function. Now we need something that's going to report a length for us. So what about that one? So this returns the length of lines or walls that meet that criteria. Now it only reports the length of line objects or walls. So if it's a polygon that you're reporting, this won't work. So if you're doing something like the length of skirting or the length of electrical wiring or something like that, or the length of a gutter, you won't be able to use that. You might have to use something like perimeter. I'm using lines and walls, so I can use that. It's gone length, okay, equals length, click on that green tick, and there's the length of my walls. Now, as I said, I'm using a metric measurement. I might want that to report in meters. So divide by 1,000. And finally, I could format those cells as a number with 3 decimal points and a M at the end of it. So now I've got a list of all of my walls. Let's have a look at area. So we know we need an equals. Let's have a look at inserting a function. Now, I've talked about this before, area. It returns the total area of 2D objects. But wait a minute, the wall is not a 2D object. We need something else that's going to find the area of a wall. We could use maybe a component, but I think down here we've got a wall area gross. So this returns the total surface of one side of the wall, but it doesn't report any holes. So if this was a foundation wall that actually had holes for ventilation, I'd need to use something like this one, the wall area net. This will report the area of the wall that does take out any holes for doors or windows or vents. So I need to use that one. Let's click on the green tick and right click on that. Let's format that cells. Now I've already set up my dimension area units as part of my file. So they will all come through. You might notice I've got some very small walls, but let's leave that alone. So those are all my walls, those are all my areas, but it's a big long list. So what can we do? If we have a look at selecting this row, this is called a database header row, you might notice that I've got 3 icons have just arrived. This is for sorting from small to large, and the sum will collect together all the walls that have got the same whatever I choose. So if I drop that sum onto column A, it'll find all the walls that have got the same name. If I drop that sum onto column B, it'll find all the walls that have got the same length and put them together. And if I drop it on column C, all the walls that have got the same area and group them together. Well, I think name is a good one, the wall type. So let's drop it onto A, and you'll see I've now got 300 footing, that's my 12-inch footing. Total length of all of those walls, 69 meters. And if I convert my units to feet and inches, then I can quickly update this report and have it convert to feet and inches. Now, Barbara, if you could just give me some feedback, please, from the users. Do they want me to convert this file to from metric to imperial? I'm more than happy to do that if they want.
Okay, let us know.
So
far,
that's
do it. Somebody says yes, do it.
All right.
Convert,
so let's
please.
do it. So let's go back to document settings. Let's go back to units, and I'll change this from meters to feet and inches. My units want to be square feet, cubic yards, and I want these to be fractional only. Okay, now there's going to be a challenge here where I've got the length divided by 1,000, so let's get rid of that and click on the green tick. Right click, format cells, let's get rid of that and just go dimension. So now you can see I've converted it into imperial. Unfortunately, my names are still metric, but we'll have to put up with that. So let's get our floor framing. So what do we need for our floor framing? Well, probably it's a good idea to have the width and the height and probably the length, and we'll see what happens. So again, we're going to right click here, we're going to choose database, the layer is foundation, the type is a framing member. So if it's not a framing member, it's not going to be reported. So that's one way to do it. But there is actually a quicker way. Let's go back to there. Now, I did say earlier on that some objects have got a really quick way to create a report. So reports, so tools on the menu bar, reports, and then we'll create a report. So this is the really quick way to create a report, but it only works with some objects. Any objects that you see here in this pop-up menu can be reported this way. So this is going to be my floor framing. It's going to report objects with a record, and we're going to look for a framing member. Now, I quickly jump to framing member by clicking in that field and hitting the F for Foxtrot, and it jumps to that. Another way to do it is to use your mouse wheel. You can scroll up and down. So we need the width, the height. Let's add those two. What else did we want to say? We wanted the length, didn't we? So I'm just going to scroll down till I find the length. And you can see there's a lot of information that I could get from this framing member if I wanted. And so you've got to go back to your report and say, what information did my report ask for? Because it might be that it needs the ending bevel or the beginning miter and so on. So width, height, length. So this is going to create a report. It's going to create a worksheet with width in the first column, then the height, and then the length. But we might want to be careful of that. If we get those in the wrong order, you can reorder those by dragging them up and down. You might notice the cursor changes shape when you go to that column with the hash in it. Now, I was going to click OK. I made this mistake yesterday during my practice. I often make this mistake. I forget that I can append this to an existing takeoff. So I can append this report to the one I've already started, my building takeoffs 3. So you just choose append, it's going to stick it at the bottom, click OK, and there it is. You notice it's added it to the bottom of the report that I've already made. So it's filled in the database, it's filled in the criteria here, it's done everything I need, it's even put in the labels for me, which is kind of cool. So I want to get rid of those rows there, right click on them, delete them. And what do we want? So do we want the width and the height to be in the units? Let's try all of those, and we'll format those cells, and we'll go dimension. And so that's given me all the dimensions that I need. Now, because I'm using feet and inches now, it's automatically come up showing the inches, and you'll notice they're just been converted from my metric measurements. So how's that? Now, earlier on, we did this summing together. Let's do that again. So let's sum everything with the same width. Great, except the heights are all different. Let's do the sum for everything that's the same height. So you'll notice that there's a range of heights there. And some people want to know, the ones that are the same length. So if I drop the sum onto that column there, now what it's given me is all of these are the same width, height, and length. Unfortunately, we don't know how many we've got. So let's copy that and paste it there.
Jonathan,
we need the quantity.
I have somebody's asking if there was a button to select to use same thickness.
What do you mean by a button to use same thickness?
Okay, this is the comment. There was a button to select in the creating the report. Is there a button to select to use same thicknesses in the creating of the report?
Same thicknesses. Oh yeah, summarize items with the same. Yes, you could have done it there. So you could do this, height, and then you say summarize items with the same width. And if you choose that to start with, it'll put the sum on one of those columns, but it'll only do one column. Where
Cool.
I then added it, so it would have gotten rid of that one. It would have gotten rid of the step that I went through, Barbara, to put that one in. But it wouldn't have done this one, and it wouldn't have done that one either. So you still have to do the other two. Now we need to know how many of each type there is. Let's insert a function, and the function is called count. And count returns the number of objects that meets the specified criteria. Make sure you put an equals in, otherwise it won't work. And so you can see some of these have only got one of them. For example, there's only one of those, but there's 18 of those. So we've now got the length, the width, the height, and the quantity. Just going to make that column a little bit narrower. Now I'm going to make some of these columns narrower, for example the length column, but you'll notice it also affects the area above. So be careful of that, because when you're changing the width of your columns, you might also, unfortunately, disrupt some of these. A solution for that might be to format that cell and wrap the text. Choose alignment and then choose wrap text. Floor framing, that needs to be the same as my foundation walls. I'm going to fix that later because I'm going to make a change to that. Now the next thing I want to do is to measure my floors. So I'm just going to push that to the side. Let's have a look. My floors are the next floor up. So let's have a look. My floors are turned off, so I'll need to turn my floors on to see them. So I use my navigation palette for that. And we should have a floor. Now depending on the way you've structured your plan, there's my floors. So that floor there, that's a floor called, that's on a class called structural slab. That's on a class called structural floor. They might be on the same class, they might not, but it depends what your report's all about. Do you need the structural components of this floor, or do you need the finishes? So if we go back to my sketch, so we're up to this part here. So this sketch here, what if some of these areas are tiles, some of these areas are different colored tiles, some of these areas are polished timber? If you want to report the areas that are polished timber, the areas that are tiles, the areas that are vinyl, the areas that are carpet, the areas that are timber decking, you will need to create objects that allow you to report those. So it might be, for example, I don't need to with this project, so I don't need to, but it might be that you need to create a series of rectangles or polygons that you can use to count or calculate entire floor finish areas. So let's have a look at how we're going to look for these objects. So these objects, that's a slab, that's a slab. So let's see what I can do. Let's go Tools on the menu bar, Reports, Create a report. Let's see if we can find an object that is a slab. So the slab is going to give us the style, the bounding, the texture set, and the height. Not a whole lot of information. Let's go back to creating it manually. So this is going to be my flooring. Floors. I need a floor type. So I'm going to type this information in manually. Now I could have used the report, but it won't give me all the information I need. Thickness, area. Now at this point I've reached the bottom of my worksheet. There's nothing below it. If I move my cursor to that corner there, you can see the cursor changes shape. I can add a couple of rows if I need. So here I'm going to turn this into a database. It's going to look at the floor 1, more choices. The type has to be a slab. If it's not a slab, it won't get found. So I'm going to look for slab objects, not floor objects. And there's only 2 of them. And I always look at this to make sure it's got about the right number. If it had 4, there's something wrong. Maybe I've ticked these by mistake. If it had a dozen, then I'd know I've got the wrong object. So the floor type, we're going to insert a function. So is there a slab style name? There's one there. Let's bring that in, put an equals in front of it, and click on the green tick. So that's found my slab style name. Again, I need to, I think, to format that cell and wrap the text. So what's my thickness? Well, let's put an equals to start with. Let's insert a function. And we're going to put in a function which is going to look for an area. Now we know that we can't use area and we can't use wall area. But there's another one we could use, which is component area by name. So this allows you to look for a particular part of your slab. So component area by name, now it needs to know what the name is. Put in a single quote because it's looking for a string or a text. Flooring. Close the quote and click on the green tick. So what have I done wrong? Have I spelled, oh goodness, I have spelled it wrong. Let's go back to that. So there should be 2 O's in flooring. Let's click on the green tick. Now it found one area but not the other. Why didn't it find the timber decking? Well, it didn't find it because if I look at this timber decking and check it out, let's edit that, you'll find that the style doesn't use the name decking. My report doesn't use decking, it uses flooring, and on this I've used decking. So let's change that to flooring. Okay, update that, and let's recalculate. And it's now found the area for the timber decking. So this is in square feet. So let's format that cell, make it a number, dimension area. And there it is. So it's now reporting those areas. Oh, sorry, those should be thicknesses, shouldn't they? So what have I done? I've got it back to front, haven't I? Compare area. So let's cut that and paste it in there. It should have been in the wrong. It should have been in that one. And let's format that and make it an area. So I was jumping ahead, I'm sorry. So this should be the thickness. So insert a function. And what do we need? I think we can use slab thickness. And format that cell as a dimension. Now it might look strange because my timber deckings ended up being 6 3/4 inches. The reason for that is that that particular slab also included the timber structure underneath it. And if I edit that and delete the structure, because I've already drawn the structure with framing members, then it'll come out with the right dimension. So let's try that. Let's edit that style, and we'll delete the solid wood framing. And OK. Let's recalculate. And it's come out at 7/8. So Barbara, are there any questions at the moment?
No questions so far.
Cool.
Carry on.
So now maybe what we could do is to look for exterior walls or doors and windows. So how are we going to find exterior walls? Well, I think the easy way to do the walls might be to do it the way we've done it previously. So let's go walls, and we need to have, we've reached the bottom of our report again. So go to that corner, let's add a couple of extra rows. We've added columns as well as rows. So walls, these are exterior walls. The exterior walls are just walls. So we need to know the wall type, exterior cladding, interior lining, and what else do we need? Is that about it? Once again, right-click, database. So this particular report is only going to look for one floor, floor 1. We need to know that we're looking for walls. So we've got loads of choices. Type is wall. So there's 22 walls that it found. Click OK. And let's start by looking for the wall type. So let's put in an equals. We'll insert a function. By now I think we've used this before, haven't we? Which is wall type name or wall style name. And click on the green tick. So it's found those exterior walls. Let's just have a look at that. Right click, format cells, and I think we need to wrap the text. So my exterior cladding. What we need to do is to find something on my exterior walls that will report just the cladding. So if we have a look at a wall in detail, I've got an exterior component. Hopefully I didn't move that. I don't want to move it by accident. So I've got an exterior component, which is my cladding. Then I've got a ventilated cavity. Then I've got my framing, and I've got my internal lining. And if I needed to report my skirting or my baseboard, then I should have that as a component as well. So here, we're going to put in an equal sign first. We're going to insert a function, and the function is going to be a component area by name. Now, if you use component area by class, and you've used the same class on both sides of the wall, it'll find both of them. If you use component area by name, and you've used the name for the same component on both sides of the wall, it'll find both sides as well. So we're going to use component area by name. So this will report the area of one side of the specified wall slab minus any holes. The name is a string that specifies the component's name. So just before we do it, let's make sure we know everything about this wall. I'm going to edit that wall style. Now I'm using Vectorworks 2016, which has the edit style directly off the object info palette. And if you're using Vectorworks 2015, you won't be able to do this. You'll have to find it in the resource browser. It just takes a bit longer. So the words I've used are cladding and lining. Those are the two things that I want to look for. I just have to check my spelling. So we're going to use component area by name. So let's insert a function. It's component area by name. I just hit the letter C to jump down quickly. And it needs to have a criteria and a name. Okay. So normally, if you're using this and it's not in a database field, you will have to put in a criteria here. So in other words, the layer, the class. But because we've built this as part of a database report, we don't have to. All we have to type in is a single quote mark, cladding, that's the name we're for, and then click on the green tick. Now the interior lining should be similar. So what we should be able to do is to go Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste, and change that from cladding to lining. Just make sure you don't accidentally delete the quote. So format cells, these are areas that we're looking for. So we should be able to use dimension area, and it should give us all our areas for our internal walls and our external walls. But you'll notice that it's reported all the walls individually. What if we use the sum again? Drop that onto column A. So all the walls that are the same type get reported together. Now you might notice that my proposed wall here doesn't report any exterior cladding. That's because it's an internal wall. Now the beauty of setting up the report using the database system rather than using a list of finding this wall, finding that wall, is that if some point in the design I change and I draw a new wall, and it's a wall I've never used before, so it's going to come from my library, and we're going to use, this is using my Slabs Imperial, I think. I was looking for one that was a, now hopefully I've used the right name for this wall. Just to make sure, I'm going to check the style, make sure it's using, now you might notice here I've used the word int lining. That won't report in my list unless I change that to just lining. So be careful of those, be careful of your drawing system, because if you choose if you have a drawing system that's not consistent, you could have trouble when it comes to create your report or making sure your report works. So this is going to be, top bound is my layer elevation with an offset of 36 inches. So that wall should now have 36 inches. Now, if I bring back my report, that's a brand new wall, and if I've done everything correctly, that should then report. So let's just go recalculate. There it is there, there's my new wall. It's got no exterior cladding, but it certainly has interior lining. So it's found the lining on that wall, both sides, which is quite cool. And if I delete that wall, or change its length in some way, all I'd have to do then is recalculate my report, and that's now vanished. So there's a very important concept here where you should be aware of building your report in such a way that should changes occur during the design process or after that, during the construction process, if you make any changes to your model, you don't want to accidentally not find those objects in your report. That would be a disaster. Imagine the truck arrives on site and there's, you know, a few sheets of plasterboard short. It's not a good look. How are we getting on for time, Barbara? I think maybe I've just got time to do the doors and windows, or maybe just I'll do windows.
Sure, we do have one question though. Can you do a takeoff on one particular component of a slab, such as the tile finish?
Yes. The technique, instead of for here, for the, where's my flooring? That's floor framing, floors. Here where I've used the area, I've used component area by name, flooring. So if you had a component called tiles, then you could find that. But to come back to what I said, if you've created one single slab and it's the entire building, that's what's going to be reported. So if you want to create a slab with a component just for the tiles, you'll have to create a small area of slab that is just the tiles. You might find it easier to use your floor finishes plan with polygons and look for the area of the polygon. So what's the last thing we're going to do? We're going to add some, I notice here, Barbara, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's getting a bit hard for me to find my bits and pieces because my formatting isn't consistent.
Okay.
Now I'm holding down the control key and I'm clicking on the cells that I want to adjust. And you might notice I've chosen them all over the place. Right-click on one of them, format that cell. We're going to change the font. We're going to make that Tecton, my favorite. Tecton Pro, it's going to be 12 points high. It's going to be bold. We can change the color as well. So you notice it's changed all of those together.
That's a great trick.
Now, if you hold the Shift key down, it chooses a whole bunch. But the Control key, and on a Macintosh, it's the Command key. You can just choose the bits you want. Foundation walls, floors, walls. Let's right-click, format cells. So this wants to be Tecton again. Tecton Pro, this is going to be 14-point high, bold, and whatever color you want. So changing the graphic style makes it easier to find. Tecton's a bad one for that, but there you are. So let's add we'll add the windows. I guess that would be the last thing we do, Barbara, because unfortunately I've got to leave early. So reports. Let's create a report. What kind of report do we want to make? Windows. So can we find a window? What do we want? We want the label. That would be good. We want the, where's it gone? Sash operation, I want that. I might want a lot of this information, but I'm just going to make it short. You'll have to come back to your report, your design, and say, what did I want? What sort of things did I really, really want? Where's width and height? They're here together somewhere. There they are. Width and height. Let's add those. Now you might notice my sash operation's in the wrong location. I want that down the bottom, so I can just drag it down. We want to append this to our existing worksheet, building takeoffs 3. We could summarize items with the same ID, but for Windows it's probably not a good idea. Unless you want to summarize the ones that have got the same width and the same height. That might work. So if I got everything, label, width, height, sash operation. Okay, there's my windows. So let's format that, and that was going to be 14 and bold. I've got some extra rows here I don't want. I'm going to get rid of 3 of them, but leave 1 so there's a bit of a gap. Sash operation needs to be wider so I can see those, but you can see by making that wider, I've also affected my quantity column up there. These might not be in order, so make sure they're in order by using that sorting part there. The width and the height, let's format those cells. They should be a dimension. Now I think I chose Windows 17 when I practiced with you, Barbara. So let's select item 17 and see where it takes us. Now it's selected a window on the drawing. You can see it there. So one of the cool tricks I think about some of this report information is that you can use it to find objects. You can also use it to change objects. So let's just have a look. That's the width there. So that should really be, we want to make that an 8-inch window because we want to stop burglars getting in. So by changing that to 8 inches there, it actually changes it on the plan. It's not going to be awning anymore, it's going to be a louver window. I'm not sure I've got louver windows here. Might be fixed glass with no sash, and so on. So you can change, you can use your report not only to get information about the objects in Vectorworks, but you can also use it to control some of them. Doesn't work with everything, but it works with some objects. So it's probably time, Barbara, that we start looking at any questions that are left, because I could do more, but it's, you know, we've covered the main strategy.
Sure, there's one question that it's also a request. Can we talk a little about wall framing member takeoffs? And I don't know if you have time, but maybe.
I don't really have time to go into detail, but there is, under framing, a wall framer. And if you want to cover the wall framer, that's almost another webinar all on its own, because there are a lot of choices you can make. It also makes a lot of assumptions. The challenge with the wall framer is that who's actually going to frame your wall? Where are they going to start putting the sticks in? If it's a gabled wall, you know, what's the design philosophy with that? Where I live, we don't tend to use the wall framer. We will tend to give the design to a construction company, a timber supplier, a lumber yard, I guess you'd call it. And they have their own software that will generate the timber framing, and they will pre-nail those frames together, put them on a truck, and then send them to the site. So the builder, when he gets them, actually has it all pre-nailed together, and all he has to do is to stand up the panels. So, but if you want to look at wall framing, now the challenge is that where you put your timber studs is actually a bit of an engineering issue. So I would be keen not to go there. Now the reason I've got to leave early, Barbara, is I've got another webinar to give for my subscribers. We're looking at alterations and additions this month, and so it's my last session this week. I usually have 4 each month, and it's the last one I've got to give. So I might have people looking for my next manual on alterations and additions.
No, we totally understand, and thank you for your time. And if you want more, you know where to go. Just go. Can you give your website? Is ArchonCAD, right, Jonathan?
ArchonCAD. It's learn.archoncad.com.
Perfect.
And if you look at the download, I've given the address here.
Great.
Learn.archoncad.com, and also I've given you another button here. I think everyone should join. The people that do join, they get a lot out of these meetings. There's over 2,500 movies on my website.
It's like Netflix for architects.
Yeah. Well, not just architects. I mean, what we went through today, we used an architectural concept to go through it, the building takeoffs. But what we've done will equally apply if you're a landscaper or a set designer or you know, in another industry. The concept of creating information in the right format, using a report to give you back the feedback from that information, you can apply that for so many different professions.
Great, and it is really like Netflix for everybody. That's great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm taking back the screen, so if you have to if you have to run, please, we don't want to hold you. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And I want to remind everyone to visit our page at noveg.com, where you can find Vectorworks 2016 in all its shapes. And Noveg is the best way to buy design software online. And for information on the latest specials and new releases, join the Noveg network on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. And don't forget, the next week's webinar is about V-Ray 3.3 for Maya. It just came out, so join us. And to watch today's webinar or previous one, check out our Noveg YouTube and Vimeo channels. Our webinar playlist has webinar for every software taste, and today's webinar will be uploaded a couple of hours from now, tops. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Jonathan. Always a great pleasure having a webinar with you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much for having me, Barbara.
Bye.